The Steam controller. People either seem to love it or downright hate it. But today we're going to try to answer one fairly basic question. Is it worth its $50 price tag? Let's find out. Starting off with some basic features and specifications, the Steam controller is a little bit different than its controller counterparts, in that instead of having dual joysticks, it actually replaces the second joystick area with a trackpad similar to what you would find on a laptop, which is normally the enemy of the PC gamer. So, given the fact that it only has one joystick, how does it hold up in the other areas that typical controllers tend to have? Well, it does have dual stage triggers on the back, as well as rear bumpers and bottom bumpers that allow you to customize the controller to make these buttons do really whatever you want in games. On the left side, you have a 4-area touchpad that is useful for menus and other in-game systems. You also have the traditional A, B, X, and Y buttons, and in the middle you have your start and select arrows, as well as the Steam button, which turns the controller on. Now, the one joystick that actually is on the controller, you can press it in, that is a separate button, but the controller itself does not use rechargeable batteries like many of its counterparts. If you get an Xbox One controller, a PlayStation controller, normally you can charge them up so that you don't have to constantly be replacing batteries. And that is one area that Valve appears not to have been interested in for the consumer, because it actually has to use 2 replaceable AA batteries. So if you're not the type of person that likes to buy a bunch of batteries, it might be worthwhile to get rechargeable AA batteries so that you can recharge the batteries and then put them back into the controller. Valve advertises that the controller should be able to get around 80 hours of gameplay time out of a single set of batteries. I haven't tested this, but it seems like the controller does do fairly well with power and battery management. As far as range for the controller goes, Valve claims that the controller should get around 5 meters, which rounds out to around 14 feet. I found this to sometimes be accurate when I was playing in an open space, but in other open spaces I found 14 feet to be a lot longer than the range I was actually getting. Sometimes I would be right next to the receiver, and I would just barely be connected. This was with 2 different Steam controllers that I have, so I'm not sure if it was an environment issue or not, but that range is fairly close to what you get. 14 feet appears to be like the absolute maximum that you can hope for from the Steam controller, unless of course you're in a fantastic environment with very little interference. I found that the haptics felt more like the type of vibration you would find in a smartphone than the type of haptic feedback you'd expect from a game controller. Now, while this isn't a major downside, the haptics are audible, but it just doesn't feel as clean as you would expect a game controller to feel. But that's not the main goal of the Steam controller anyway. The Steam controller is meant to be a customizable controller, so that whatever game you're playing, you can custom map all of the buttons on the controller to create an experience that is comfortable for you. That is one of the main selling points of the Steam controller, that keyboard and mouse games that you would typically only play with a keyboard and mouse could be played with a Steam controller if you didn't feel like getting off the couch. So, how well does the Steam controller accomplish the ability to play PC games in this format? Well, the answer is somewhat of a mixed bag. If you're playing something like Rocket League, which I find to actually be preferable with a controller, you're able to be a little bit more precise with a controller in that game, which is somewhat counterintuitive, but that game I find is very well optimized for the Steam controller. In fact, if you're playing that game, and that is one of the main games you're going to be playing, then yes, the Steam controller would be worth its price. But if you're going to be playing a variety of games, for example CSGO, then the Steam controller loses some of that selling point. Because although the touchpad does allow for more precision than a joystick does, it still doesn't come anywhere close to meeting the precision of a mouse and keyboard in those games. I was talking about range a little bit earlier, and if you're thinking about how you're going to pair the Steam controller with your computer, you have to use a dongle. The Steam controller dongle simply plugs right into an open USB port. The Steam controller appears to prefer USB 2.0. Valve created it with the intention of using USB 2.0, so some people have reported issues with 3.0 ports, so it would be the safest bet to plug it into a 2.0 legacy port if you have one of those on your build. Now, if for whatever reason your wireless receiver is having trouble or you don't want to use it, you can use the included micro USB to USB cable to plug the Steam controller directly into your computer. You'll actually need to use this cable to update the firmware on the controller, or if you're having trouble pairing it, you will need to plug it in directly so the computer can recognize it. But I'm confused as to why, if Valve integrated a USB port onto the controller, they couldn't just set up rechargeable lithium-ion batteries inside. But that's something that might come in V2, if there is one. Also, one of the things about the controller that was a little bit odd was that it didn't come with an included case. Now, the case itself is fine. It has room for storage of all of the Steam controller accessories, but it doesn't come with the actual controller. In fact, if you want it, it's sometimes an extra $20 to get it off of Amazon or Steam. I was able to pick it up on a sale for $10, but still, this is the type of thing that should be included with the controller. Considering the fact that the glossy areas of plastic are easy to scratch and fingerprint magnets, you would want something to be able to store this in when you're not using it. So I found it a little bit disappointing and a bit strange that this wasn't included in the box to begin with, but that's more of a minor inconvenience than anything else as far as the controller's quality goes. So although we didn't have an extremely satisfying answer other than it depends on whether or not you should purchase the Steam controller and whether it's worth its $50 price tag, ultimately that is the only realistic answer that a reviewer can give about this controller. Because the Steam controller is strange in its creation. It's halfway a controller and halfway wanting to be a mouse and keyboard. So it's for a very specific market that may or may not fully exist. But that's kind of the Valve way. So, would you buy the Steam controller? And would you recommend it to a friend? If yes or no, let me know down in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe so that you are the first to know when new videos come out. And that does it for this episode. Thanks for watching.